Okay, time has come to start the Finance and Purchasing Committee meeting from Monday, October 21st, 2019. Roll call, please.
Alderman Newsome.
Present.
Alderman Moiseo.
Here.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Here.
Alderman Rivera.
Present.
Alderman Seeger. Do you have a quorum?
Okay, item C, approval of the minutes. Take a motion by Alderman Kirkwood, second by Alderman Rivera, to approve the minutes as shown from October 7th, the special finance and purchasing committee meeting. Are there any questions on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion opposed? Motion carried. Public comment. Is there anyone that want to speak on anything on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. You want to we'll entertain a motion from Alderman Moiseo, second by Alderman Kirkwood,
To move H and I
to move H and I
under reports.
under reports up to the beginning.
Sure.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
H is the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Greenest Region Core Program, and Marcus is here to speak a little bit about that.
Okay. Okay, Marcus, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here this afternoon to announce that the City of Waukegan was awarded a grant through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, which we are a member of under the Environmental Committee. This was a grant because we are part of the Greenest Region Compact 2, which was voted on by the City Council last year. This is a program that will give us a AmeriCorps member who is here this evening, and she will be up to introduce herself. This is a program that will be partnering with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus over the next 10 months to create a sustainability plan based off of the Greenest Region Compact. This includes coastal management, as well as infrastructure, green infrastructure, as well as renewable energy. This is something that has been set forth by the Cunningham administration, and I think it would be a good thing to have here in the city.
Hi, I'm Maya Dutta. I'm the AmeriCorps volunteer member. I recently graduated from Washington University in St. Louis with degrees in environmental biology and anthropology. I'm really excited to be serving in the city of Waukegan. I had my orientation last week, so I learned a lot about AmeriCorps and city government, and I'm excited to learn more for the next 10 months or so.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Maya or Marcus? Alderman Kirkwood?
Yes, can you kind of outline some of the things that she will be working with the administration on?
So one of the things that she'll be working on is to continue our So Smart project. We were given designation of gold standard under the So Smart Foundation, and most recently Home Depot came in and delivered a building permit for solar installation to be built on their Belvedere store, and that was almost $1 million in solar permit. This is something that we're excited about, and we want to continue with working with Maya as well as in the building department to talk to our commercial owners to try to get some more solar arrays. The other thing that she'll be working on is integrating a coastal management plan due to the high water levels. This is something that we have to consider as climate adaptation. Our water plant is the most vulnerable asset that we have on the lakefront, and that's something that we have to plan for as we move forward with our water quality and increasing our wholesale customer base for the future. So that's something that she'll be working on, as well as in the Public Works Department as we move forward with infrastructure, making sure that we are building for the future with bike lanes, as well as green infrastructure to make sure that we're not creating more stormwater issues as we move forward into the future. So those are some of the things that she'll be working on, both internally and externally with other governmental entities, including our Waukegan Park District and our Waukegan Port District.
Thank you.
Is there anyone questions? Alderman Taylor?
We won't be able to pick you up if you don't get to the... Don't kill yourself.
Is the mayor's caucus something that we pay into, that all mayors in the area pay into as a group, and that's how the funds are dispersed based on that?
Yes, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus makes up of the Chicagoland area communities. This was started under Mayor Daley. He felt that the city of Chicago should be thinking regionally and working with other regional partners. And so we as a city have been part of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus since the beginning of it back in the 90s.
I can look that up. The membership itself, I don't know unless
I know it's
Noel
based on
knows.
population, but
Yeah, it's based on population. I can pull the invoice and forward it to you. This is a separate program. I'm sorry?
I saw we just paid $9,000. Is that...
That might be. It's based on population. So Chicago pays more than we do. We'll pay more than Round Lake Beach. But I can certainly provide the invoice. This is a separate program than that you have to be a member of this to participate in this program. But I can pull that for you and email that to you. Okay.
Ms. Tina, motion to seat Seeger.
Take a motion by Alderman Kirkwood, second by Alderman Moiseo to seat Alderman Seeger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, we'll go on to item I. Is it item I, Ruth?
Yes.
Okay, it's all yours.
So per State of Illinois Public Act 98-0738, we present the annual audit to the Finance and Purchasing Committee on behalf of the City Council. And so we've prepared a short PowerPoint for you tonight, but I'm more than happy to come back after council and talk as long as anybody wants to about the report. We did ask to move it up because Fred Lance is here. He's a partner at Sickage LLP and has to be in Flossmoor by 7:30. So we'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. So our independent auditors who I mentioned are Sickage LLP. This is our third year with Sickage. We did do an RFP process in conjunction with Round Lake Beach, I think, and the library, and that's how we selected Sickage. The auditors have to adhere to government auditing standards. Their role is really to provide reasonable assurance that our financial statements are free of material misstatement. Now, Fred and his team provide invaluable guidance and, and assistance during the audit process, but they don't necessarily say that we're doing a good job or bad job financially. What they're saying is that our financial statements are accurate and presented free of material misstatement. They do issue an opinion on our financial statements, and we have what's called a clean opinion that's contained in the document. Next slide. There we go. So there's many, many reports that are issued, and I do want to take a moment because a lot of our finance team is here today, and just recognize those that are here. Karen Kay, who's running the laptop, is one of our senior accountants. Itzel Garcia Morales, sorry, I couldn't remember which way it went, is one of our staff accountants, and she works in our revenue collection. Juan Garcia is a senior accountant in revenue collection, and Sherry Martinez, who is also a senior accountant over disbursement control. So Juan will take in the money with Itzel, Sherry sends out the money, and then Karen makes sure it's all booked. So that's kind of how it works. So some of the reports we have, the big one is the comprehensive annual financial report. That's this big report here, a couple hundred pages long. It is available in its entirety on our website. I encourage everyone to look at the report in its entirety. Within the CAFR, there are many sections, which I'll get on the next slide. Also, we have the management letter, which is posted on our website. That's a smaller report, but it does kind of lay out the auditor's role versus the city's role. The auditor's communication to the city council and management, that's also known as our audit findings report. That is not a public document, but it is attached under executive content on board docs tonight. We're more than happy to discuss that in executive session if you'd wish. We have tax increment finance reports, so TIF reports that have an opinion with them as well. And then the single audit we are required to do because we have federal dollars of such a large amount that we spend. We have to do a separate audit just on those federal dollars. Some other reporting and filing requirements that the city has is the AFR and TIF reports that are filed with the state comptroller. The AFR is the annual financial report. So if you ever go onto the state comptroller's website and you look at where they have the, I think they call it, not clearinghouse, I forget what they call it. They have a section on their website where you can look up local governments and compare one government to another. That's based on the AFR. The TIF reports are also filed with them on an annual basis. The GATA is relatively new, and that is the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act. And this is a new state requirement, which is very similar to single audit, but this drills down more into state grants and state funding, and that's a new requirement that we'll be filing this year. The Federal Clearinghouse is where we place the single audit information, so federal agencies like Department of Justice or HUD can go obtain our information. Because we have bonds that are publicly traded, we also have to do continuing disclosure on EMA, which I looked up. It is the Electronic Municipal Market Access, and that is an SEC requirement that we do filings there. And then, of course, we have the annual treasurer's report that is filed with the county and also published in the local newspaper, and I believe that it is on tonight's council agenda. If not, it will be. And then we also finally have the Illinois Department of Insurance report that our police pension and fire pension funds file separate from us. They do copy us on that, but it's using, again, all of the audited information. So this one report, this CAFR, leads to all of these different reporting requirements. Okay, next slide, please. So the CAFR that we'll be touching on tonight has a lot of really interesting information in it. The introductory section, which I won't spend too much time on, has our list of officials, organizational chart. We also participate in the Government Finance Officers Association certification program. So our award from last year is in the document. And then the transmittal letter, which is management's letter to the reader of the document, kind of explaining how our fiscal year went. The financial section, which is the meat and potatoes of the report, has the auditor opinion letter that I talked about. It has a management discussion and analysis section, which Government Finance Officers Association kind of dictates what's in that, and that's a high-level summary. So if you really are looking for a pull-out document, something to pull out from the CAFR to kind of get a gauge on how the city's financial health is, the management discussion and analysis section, the MD&A, is probably the best 12 to 14 pages for that. Then, of course, we have our general purpose financial statements, which is rolling up all of those fund financial statements we talk about, not fund. When we talk about the general fund or the motor fuel tax fund, those all get rolled up. So we have two main funds, governmental and then business type. And those are the general purpose. And then we do report on every single fund, too, so those are also in there. And then the statistical section is not audited, but it does provide 10 years information. There's financial trends, revenue capacity, debt capacity, demographic and economic information, as well as operating stats in there. So there's a lot of good information in there. Okay, next slide. So we'll get right into it. So our governmental activities, condensed statement of activities. That's a lot of activities to talk about. So this covers all of our funds that aren't the enterprise funds. So our general fund, special revenue funds, capital funds, debt service, the internal service fund, and our stabilization fund. So whether it's motor fuel tax or our street rehabilitation fund or the general fund, it's all rolled up into these larger funds for the year. So our Our revenues increased by 1.9 million to a total of 95.3 million for the fiscal year, and our expenses increased 14 million versus the prior year at 109.1 million. So our fiscal year did end with a $13.8 million deficiency before transfers, and then after our net transfers and period end adjustments, our net position ended the fiscal year in the negative at $171 million. So this would be very similar to an income statement in the private sector. Okay, next slide. So we can break that down a little bit. We have two charts here. The revenues and the expenses for our governmental activities, year-over-year comparison. So our largest source of revenues for these funds increased by 2.2% to a total of 64.1 million. And the majority of this increase is due to the 1 million more in property taxes that were levied and collected during the fiscal year. Intergovernmental revenues increased just under 2% to 11.8 million, and this was driven by an increase in income taxes. It's a shared state of Illinois revenue based on population calculations. Program revenues also slightly increased as certain one-time non-recurring grants were received. Now on the expense side, you can see that dramatic increase there from 64.5 to 83 million, and that is our public safety expenses. Really went up quite a bit, almost 29%. And that was almost entirely attributed to the $8.6 million police liability claim that we settled during the year. But we also had substantial increases in the employer costs associated with sworn police and fire, work comp, liability, and pensions. Streets, bridges, and public works realized a decline in expenses, and this is related to the net impact of depreciation and capital asset removal transactions as we really undertake our capital improvement plan in earnest. Interest and fiscal charges, which is the smallest bars there, that went up over 100%. And the reason that increased to 4.3 million from 2.1 is because we issued 3 bond issues during the fiscal year, and that was to fund our capital program. But when you issue bonds, you've got to pay the interest. So the interest did go up there. So just some food for thought. Our fiscal year 19 expenses were 115% of our revenues. In the prior year, we were at 102% of our revenues. So another way to look at this is for every dollar that we took in, we spent $1.15. And that led to the deficit.
The 1 million in property taxes, what generated that? The value of the property increasing?
Well, now remember, these are all of our funds combined. So the property taxes that are collected for debt service, pensions, garbage, and the library are all accounted for here.
Right, but I mean, you said in the revenue.
Our levy was $1 million higher.
Because,
When you combine all of those, the cost for the library went up.
Why do we have an increase in the tax? You said the property
taxes
increased $1 million.
Yes.
Why did the property tax collection increase $1 million? Was that because of the value of the land?
No, it's because we levied $1 million more.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. So this is our condensed statement of net position, and Fred can attest to this. We love to make things confusing in government and call it different things. So this is a balance sheet, okay? So in the private sector, you would call this a balance sheet. So assets minus liabilities equals your stockholders' equity in the private sector. So in government, we like to call it net position. So we can feel like we're doing something different, I suppose. But so for fiscal year 19, our assets at the end of the fiscal year were 274 million. That was an increase of 40 million. That is almost entirely driven by the cash that came in the door from issuing those bonds. So we had a large inflow of cash because we issued bonds. Our liabilities then also went up. They went up 53 million to 445 million. And I am going to talk a little bit about what those make up those liabilities in a bit. But our net position, so if we were in the private sector, this would be stockholders' equity, is a negative 171 million. So similar to trying to put it on that dollar basis. So for every dollar we have in assets, we owe $1.63 as of the end of the fiscal year. Okay, next slide.
That was just for 2019.
Correct. So the position actually worsened from 2018. So as of 2019, those are our assets and liabilities on the books at that time. And that includes long-term liabilities, not just things due within the next 30 or 60 days. That includes all of our long-term obligations, which I will touch on a little bit. So here, it's a little hard to see, so I apologize for that. But here's our assets and liabilities broken down so you can kind of get a feel for that. So our current assets increased to $115 million. So that's the largest, just a little bit over half, the largest piece of our pie, 52% there. And like I said, most of that's attributed to an increase in cash from the bond issuances that we did. Restricted assets remain unchanged, and that restricted asset, that $5.6 million, 3%, that's the Fountain Square property. That's what that is. So that is the appraised value at that point in time, regardless of whatever offers might be floating around there currently. We still stick to what we know appraisers say the value is worth. So that's why that is there, and it remains unchanged. Then our capital assets, net of depreciation, make up 45% of our assets, and that's just under $100 million there. Our liabilities increased by $3.9 million, or the current liabilities increased by $3.9 million to $8.7 million. You can see that's that really little slice. So the current liabilities that are things that are due kind of right away, so things that we're going to pay in the next 3 months, 6 months. So those are our short-term liabilities. And we had an uptick because we had more capital money to spend because we issued bonds. We had more accounts payables at the end of the year because we were spending more money because we were doing projects. We also had some sales tax rebate obligations that we booked as a payable. The Illinois Department of Revenue had changed their reporting, so we had to kind of take a guess at what we were going to owe. It has since been paid. In fact, they're on tonight's bill run. And then the other thing that we had at 4:30 that we talked about quite a bit in Finance Committee in the past was we had unsettled union contracts at the time, the fire union being the largest, which has since been settled. So we guessed at what we thought that retro pay would be, and then we booked it at the time. But our largest part of our liabilities, you can see there that 98% of the pie is the $396 million in non-current or long-term liabilities. So Karen, if you'll go to the next slide, we'll talk about what those are. So here's the listing of our long-term liabilities as of April 30th. The net pension liability, and you'll see that on there 3 times, police, fire, and IMRF. So net pension liability is the difference between the total pension liability, which is the present value of projected benefits that will be paid to the participants in those plans, minus the assets, so what the investments that they currently hold at fair market value. And those are set aside, obviously. So police, net pension liability, fire, net pension liability, and IMRF net pension liability account for 60%, 60, of our total long-term liabilities as of April 30th. Police and fire being the largest liabilities we have on our books at that time. We also have debt outstanding for bonds. Now, this is principal, is how we record it. So for our general obligation bonds, what we're showing there is the TIF note. That is a note to bridge development. We have some special assessment bonds on the bottom there in Wells Capital Leases for snowplows and ambulances. Those are a combined total of $137 million, and that makes up 34% of our long-term liabilities as of April 30th. 2 things that we don't see too much, the auditors and the finance department talk about it quite a bit, but we have our OPEB liability, and that's other post-employment benefits. And we do bring that to you once a year, and this is health insurance provided to retirees. So for the most part for the city of Waukegan, this is for police officers and firefighters that received a line of duty disability pension and receive health insurance at no cost to the employee, but at full cost to the employer. So that's the liability for that. And then vested compensated absences was $6.5 million at the end of the fiscal year. So all of our union contracts, and non-union as well, have provisions for cashing out unused time at termination and/or retirement. So, for example, when you terminate employment, you get a check for your unused vacation time. If you retire, you get a check for 50%, 50 cents on the dollar for unused sick time. Now, there are some maximums on that time, but they can accrue at a pretty hefty amount. So we've seen, and there might be some on tonight's agenda, that, we can have a fireman or a police officer retire and receive a $50,000 check for those accrued balances, because they are paid out at their rate of pay at the point of retirement, not necessarily when they earn that time. So what we do is we take everybody's time off banks as of April 30th, 50% for the sick time, and we calculate the worth at that point in time. So that's what the compensated absence is. Claims payables, those are our work comp and general liability claims that are accrued but not yet paid as of April 30th. And then environmental cleanup, it's Yeoman Creek. So that's our liabilities. So those are the reasons that our long-term liabilities are so high as compared to our assets. Are there any questions on that? So we'll drill down. I'm only going to cover the general fund tonight. Of the governmental funds, the general fund is the largest. It is the major fund in our governmental funds. So here is how we did actual versus our budget. So our revenues finished about $720,000 under the budget projections for a total of $70.5 million. Sales, home rule sales, and telecommunication tax were under budget estimates by about $2.2 million, but were partially offset by the positive performance in local use tax, utility, hotel, food and beverage tax, and gaming tax exceeding the budget projections. Our share of state of Illinois income tax and personal property replacement tax, as well as some state and federal grants we received, resulted also in an unfavorable variance to the budget. So these are part of the reasons that we finished a little bit underneath budget. It was a little bit of an odd year for our expenses. Our general fund actual expenses came in for a total of $82 million, which did end up under the budget after a supplemental appropriation, but versus the original budget, finished quite a bit over. A supplemental appropriation was done during the fiscal year, increasing our legal budget authority from $74.5 million to $83.5 million, and that accounted for the inflow of bond money to settle that police liability claim. So versus our legally adjusted budget, we finished under budget, but the original budget we were over. Regardless, our excess over revenues was $11 million to the negative. However, you can see that $8.7 million, or that $8.7 million, that was the bond money to come in. So we did record the settlement of that police liability claim and expenses, accounted for that with the bond issue. So after that, our deficit was $2.7 million in the general fund for this fiscal year. Now, it was better than what was budgeted. We had anticipated a $3.3 million deficit, but it is still a deficit nonetheless. So our fund balance as of April 30th, which does include the stabilization funds, was $26 million. And that accounts for about 32% of our expenses. Okay. I'm sorry, any questions on the general fund? All right, so we will jump into our business type activities. And this is our water and sewer fund and our parking enterprise fund. So our revenues increased by $3.4 million to a total of $18 million for the year. Part of that, we did have a decline in parking revenue. We've seen declines in our parking revenue for the past few years, but we did have an increase in our water and sewer rates. We also had a one-time capital contribution, which is the value of water, sewer, and storm and water main improvements that were made by Bridge and donated to the city. So you'll see a contribution there. We do continue to put sales tax, home rule sales tax, into the parking fund to help subsidize it. And that's something we're going to have to continue doing until those bonds are paid off. Water and sewer expenses grew 8.2%. $10.6 million of that was due to commodities used to maintain our water system. And then we also had increased interest because we issued water bonds last year as well. Maintenance, operations, and repairs drove up our parking fund expenses. So our change in net position after transfers was actually increased by 6.7. So we had a rather positive year. Okay, next slide. Uh-oh, we're frozen. Can you get it to go to the next slide? Itzel, can you help her? There you go. Thank you. All right, so again, this is like our balance sheet for the business type activities, and you can see it's a much different story than our governmental type activities. So our assets did go up to 109, almost $110 million. Again, similar to our governmental, this is because we issued bonds. So we had a lot of cash that came into the city. Our restricted assets nearly doubled as new bond issuance requires a set aside for monies into a restricted account. And then capital assets net of depreciation also increased. Our liabilities increased $18.7 million from the prior year. And this increase is directly related to the issuance of bonds. So really, in this fund, the liabilities are IMRF and bonds. That's pretty much it. So unlike our governmental, if you see here, for every dollar we have in assets, we only owe 29 cents in liabilities. So these funds are really healthy and doing well. And this is kind of like an income statement. It's a little different presentation than we do on the general fund. So you can see that our operating revenues minus our operating expenses generated a $4.5 million operating income. Our non-operating revenues and expenses, that's pretty much interest paid on the bonds. And then we have some transfers. The contribution I mentioned were those assets donated to us from the bridge development. Increased our net position as of April 30th to $72 million. So again, it's $72 million on paper. That does include capital assets. It's not all cash. So these funds are doing pretty well. And that's all I had to cover tonight. Fred's here if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, either here or if you want to follow up with me. And if you do want to go into executive session to discuss the audit findings,
Roger J. Schwab.
we can do that if the committee would like to do that.
Did anyone have any questions? Being none, we'll just, did you all have any questions, Alderman? Okay. All right, we'll go back into our regular business. Under new business, we have item A, motion to authorize the proper city officials to approve change order number 1 in the amount of $150,000 with Seorber Group Consulting Engineers for the continuation of the 2019 Bridge and Culvert Engineering Task Order, resulting in a revised contract amount of $285,100. The contract was originally approved on February 20th, 2018, in the amount of $135,110. Take a motion by Alderman Rivera, second by Alderman Seeger. Are there any questions on the motion? And I guess the budget, this will come out of the motor fuel tax fund?
Yes.
Any questions on the motion? Alderman Rivera?
Just for Mike, the increase, is this, we understate, or they understated the job, or?
I think there was some additional,
I don't know, this probably isn't on, I don't know.
it's on, it's on.
Oh. What happened was, unless you want to explain it, at Washington Street, they did the engineering for that. And also, we have them doing another engineering project on New York and Highland, and Edie can explain that. So when it comes to culverts, they basically do the engineering.
Okay.
That's what we've contracted them for. So that's some of the increases that we've seen here. Okay.
There was some additional work. They're doing Highland at New York. They're redoing the street. And when they got ready to do the curbing, they found out that the culvert underneath had all broken up. So they had to redo and put in new piping for that.
Right, and it was quite high, and we have sidewalks. The reason we found out about it was because basically we're redoing the road. When they went to do the curb, they found out the culvert had holes in it from the previous time they did the curve. So we had to
It
replace it.
wasn't taken care of at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions on? Roll call, please.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood? Aye. Alderman Rivera?
Aye.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Newsom?
Aye, motion carried. Item B, motion to grant an exception to the competitive bidding process pursuant to Section 2-458, subsection I-3, Government Joint Purchasing Act, and approve the award of a contract with Gray Bar in the amount of $830,000 for the improvement of street lighting as described in the attached scope of work. This project utilizes 2018 B general obligation bond funds. And let's see, I'd like to, there was some question, I guess, regarding going through with this because there is some additional information. So I'd like to put a condition on this before they start the work. It's under the condition approval of staff and legal before they start the work. And you can speak to it, Mr.
Yes,
Hewitt.
actually, we've used Gray Bar this year for the first time for some of the other lighting issues we've had. And what they do basically is they go out and find either state bids or contracts that already been let and find the best prices for us. They've done an excellent job. They will help to manage some of these issues, but it'll be basically on a work-by-work process, okay? So like when they do Washington Street, we'll make sure that certain things are done. The Washington Street will be removable streetlights. It's a new design where when you get a tooth and they drill and put a post in, they're going to do the same with these lighting. So what will happen is if we have to move them or take them down for any reason, they unscrew, come off, and we put new on. The other issue is the time limit on this is important because Commonwealth Edison has increased the amount of money they're paying us back by putting streetlights in and changing them to LEDs. And that will be until January. So if we get these ordered and go forward with it, we're going to and they'll get the rebates, they come back to us. And they're quite substantial right now. Plus the fact that every month we have LEDs, we save money on our electrical bill. Okay? Any other questions? Any questions?
Just one question. So Gray Bar goes out and searches for the lowest bid?
Yeah, they search for the best prices on everything we're doing,
Okay.
which is, it saves quite a bit. And if you do a bid, sometimes it may not be the best, but this is, it's almost like Office Supply Plus where they sell us products, but they make sure it's the lowest prices, correct? It's kind of the same design.
They will be subcontracting the work after they go out and solicit proposals from subcontractors.
It's really really good.
Okay. So why wouldn't we solicit the work ourselves? Is it,
We could, but we'd have to go and do research and figure out who would bid, and then we really should bid. This way it kind of gives them the option to get us the best prices possible. Okay?
okay, thank you.
You'd like to make a motion to amend the
To
motion?
amend the motion to read that
You'd
under
like
the condition,
Scope of work? Is that what you're amending?
let's see. Yeah, the scope of work, because there was some question regarding handicap and all that stuff, but I think they
Any
do.
questions, Joe?
Yeah,
And
so
we'll oversee the staff and
Here
myself.
comes the lawyer now.
Under
Maybe
the
he can-
condition,
Oh, and he's walking away. Okay. As described, as approved,
under approval of staff and legal, because there's,
staff and legal.
yeah, because the attorneys wanted to look at some legal,
In other words, when we go forward, if there's any glitches or problems.
Douglas is here.
Mr. Durando, we're trying to do this motion with the Gray Bar to, under the condition of approval from staff and legal. Is that the scope of the work? Is that we're putting under the condition?
We're looking for help in how to
How to word
amend the
it.
motion.
believe just adding the language as described in the attached scope of work pending review by city staff and legal.
Pending review by city staff
Legal
and
Legal
legal
counsel.
legal counsel.
So do we have to vote on the motion to amend?
Yes, and then you have to vote on that motion.
Okay. Take a motion by Alderman Moiseo, second by Alderman Kirkwood, to amend the motion to read as follow.
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion to grant an exception to the competitive bidding process pursuant to Section 2-458I3 Government Joint Purchasing Act and approve the award of a contract to Gray Bar in the amount of $830,000 for the improvement of street lighting as described in a scope of work approved by staff, city staff, and legal counsel. This project utilizes 2018B general obligation bond funds.
Yes, thank you. Roll call.
Call?
Oh, roll call. A roll call for the amendment.
We're voting to amend the motion, and then you'll vote on the amended motion itself.
Why though? I mean, what's wrong with the way it stayed right here?
Because they need to look at some further work, paperwork with Gray Bar.
I believe there were ADA compliance issues, perhaps, that needed to be worked into the scope of work.
Okay.
Roll
Is
call.
that right?
It would be that. What basically boils down to is we want to oversee and make sure everything's, which we would anyways, but we'll put that in the amendment. And if there's any other issues, okay? But we're doing the street
City
lighting
staff
on
wants to
Washington
look
Street,
at it.
Macquarie. And this also gives us the option of, we can buy it through them, and then, let's say we decide we want to install. That gives us the option by, if you sign a contract, so they do everything. This may be where we can adjust things, save a little money, and maybe do more lighting. Okay?
So this, it's $830,000,
Yes.
isn't a set price right now?
Lighting poles.
Yes.
It's a not-to-exceed amount.
Yeah.
So we're voting right now on the amendment of the motion. Roll call, please.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Rivera?
Aye.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Newsome?
Aye.
Now would you like a
Okay,
roll call?
yes, now we're gonna vote on the amended motion.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Rivera?
Aye.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Newsome?
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. Item C, motion to grant an exception to the competitive bidding process pursuant to Section 2-458, subsection I3, Government Joint Purchasing Act, and approve the award of a contract to West Side Tractor Sales in the amount of $153,161.41 for the purchase of a 2019 John Deere 644K FT4 four-wheel drive loader with accessories, warranties, less trade-in, and discount. This project utilizes 2018B general obligation bond funds. Motion by Alderman Seager, second by Alderman Moiseo. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Hewitt?
Is there any questions you
Are
have?
there any questions? Alderman Kirkwood.
So is this the only place that we can purchase this? Is that why we're doing the exception?
Actually, what it is the pricing came into play. The piece of equipment we're trading in was an excavator, a John Deere excavator, so they gave us the best trade-in price. And the actual price of the machine is cheaper. We priced it out with, what was it, Caterpillar, and it's really a good deal. And it's through the joint purchasing, which gives us, we get the state pricing.
Joint purchasing is with the state,
Okay.
so usually it's a better deal.
And also, they're going to make it for us. It isn't something they have on the lot, which is good. So we're going to end up with it probably in the next 2 months, so it'll be ready for winter.
And so the accessories that are going to go along with this purchase, are they similar to the ones that we had previous, or is there additional
Well,
accessories?
actually, what I liked about this as well is we have a snow blower attachment, and before I got the job, my predecessor got rid of the one and only machine we could attach it to. So with the adjustments, we asked them to take and make it so the bucket would come off. And if we do a little rigging on the snow blower, we can attach the snow blower to it. So if we do get a bad winter, we're able to utilize it. Otherwise, the machinery is useless. And the other thing is we're getting a snow blade with this. So if we do, in the event we do have a blizzard, this machine can go out and pretty much push anything. I always think winter, so don't mind me.
Also with the blade and the bucket.
Yes.
And it also includes a warranty on it
Which I like.
for the first 12 months. Any more questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Seager.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Aye.
Alderman Newsome.
Aye, motion carried. Item D, motion to grant an exception to the competitive bidding process pursuant to Section 2-458, subsection I-3 Joint Purchasing Act, and approve the award of a contract to Packer City International Trucks in the amount of $166,961.31 for the purchase of a snowplow truck with spreader. This project utilizes 2018B general obligation bonds. Motion by Alderman Kirkwood, second by Alderman Rivera. Are there any questions on this motion?
The competitive process again.
Yes, and the nice part about this is when you get into the bigger trucks, usually it's a year wait. We were fortunate enough to find this distributor who apparently somebody was going to buy it and decided not to. Otherwise, we'd have to wait a year to get the trucks. So this one worked out extremely well. As a matter of fact, if we pass it tonight, we probably can have it within 2 weeks.
And if I can just explain that language to clarify, under the city code, under our purchasing section of the city code, there's exceptions to the competitive bidding process, and some of those things are like utilities, professional services, and a joint purchasing contract is an exception to the competitive bidding process. So if you're using a contract that's already been bid by the state of Illinois or Lake County or a joint purchasing co-op, it's already gone through a bidding process. However, the language in our city code requires that the motion waive the competitive bidding process pursuant to that section of our code, which is acknowledging that it is under a joint purchasing contract. So when you see this language, it's a little wordy and it's a lot of legalese. But if there's a joint purchasing act reference, that means that the contract's already been bid under another joint purchasing agreement. And our corporation counsel, Douglas Durando, looks at those and ensures that they have in fact met the criteria of joint purchasing. Just to clarify that language.
Did we do a roll call?
Sure. Alderman Seager.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Aye.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Newsome.
Aye, motion carried. Item E, motion to grant an exception to the competitive bidding process pursuant to Section 2-458, subsection I-3, Government Joint Purchasing Act, and approve the award of a contract to Curry Commercial in the amount of $305,226 for the purchase of 6 2020 Ford F-250 4x4 SD Super Cab trucks. This project utilizes 2018B general obligation bond funds. Motion by Alderman Moiseo. Second by Alderman Kirkwood. Are there any questions on this motion?
How long will it take to get these trucks?
That's a good question. Actually, talking to them today, if it goes through this evening, we're looking at January, which is pretty good. They're being built. They'll have everything that we need. These are also trucks that are going to have expandable plows, which means instead of an 8-foot plow, it can go up to 10 feet by expanding, which will help with parking lots, alleyways, and such. And for the first time, we're going to put spreaders on the pickups. So if the foremen are out doing something, let's say they find a spot, they can salt and spread on it as well. Yes, sir.
Does this replace some of our trucks, or is it?
Actually, what happens is this is going to go into the foreman's trucks, and then the foreman's trucks will be basically rolled out into the rest of the fleet. And the last time we bought a foreman, well, the ones that we're replacing at this point in time are from 2002. So they're quite old. and they'll go into the fleet, and then we have other ones that are really probably not going to, they're bad shape. So we're going to be auctioning them off and getting rid of those.
So how are we maintaining the fleet? So once we get to the point that we are auctioning them off, they're no more use for our particular employees that are utilizing those trucks. How often do we do that?
More often I'd like. We have quite a few things at the yards from police and fire. But what we do is when it's determined it's really unsafe or unusable, we also do that when we do, basically that's why we do auction rather than trade it in. Because if you trade it in, sometimes it may end up back out there. And this way, if we auction it, it's stated on there why we're getting rid of it and what problems there are with them.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Alderman Seager?
Like, on the pickups that we have 6?
Yes, 6 foreman's trucks. And we're going to be passing those down to do general work during the day. All right. They're a little bit better shape than some of the ones we're getting rid of. Anyways, we won't comment too much on the fleet, but yes. Okay.
Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Rivera?
Aye.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Newsome?
Aye, motion carried. Item F, motion to approve the award of a contract to Capanella & Sons, the lowest qualified bidder, in order to make Rugby Court water main improvements in an amount of $147,448.15. This project utilizes 2018 Water and Sewer Fund bonds. Are there any questions? Oh, motion by Alderman Rivera. Second by Alderman Seager. Are there any questions to the motion?
This is a water main that we've had basically on the books for 2 years, and we've had EPA approval. And matter of fact, we just had a water main break there, I think about a month ago. So this is one in desperate need of replacement. And the bid was a good bid. All right.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Rivera?
Aye.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Newsome?
Aye. Motion carried. G, motion to grant an exception to the competitive bidding process pursuant to Section 2-458, subsection I-7, good faith waiver, and approve the award of a contract to Chicago Communications in order to install a wireless backhaul infrastructure at the water plant in the amount of $70,000. This project utilizes 2018 Water and Sewer Bond funds. Motion by Alderman Moiseo. Second by Alderman Rivera. Are there any questions to this motion? Did you want to speak to it, Mr. Eric? If there are any questions?
Can you explain backhaul?
It's the wireless backhaul communications between the water plant and us. It bounces from the Genesee Theater back over to us. The old, the wireless backhaul system is kind of like your wireless infrastructure at your house.
Okay.
Only just bounces relays and goes back and forth.
Okay.
They're going to replace the antiquated, I believe it's about 13 years old. It's failing, so we'd like to replace it with a more secure.
And this is happening at the plant? Got it.
When's the last time this has been done?
Geez, back in, I'm saying 01, 02.
I was going to say early 2000s, probably.
So do we have it on a regular cycle that we don't wait until it starts failing, that we have a plan that in place that we know that every so often that we need to provide funds to do the upgrade?
Yes, we're going to start implementing that type of a structure as soon as this is in
Going
place.
forward.
Okay, because that would be good so that we know that we have these funds that we need to expend and not just because something is failing.
And I believe this was part of the reason for the good faith waiver, was because this was already, this is Eric stuff, that's what we call it, when it says stuff like backhaul. But because Chicago Communications already has for the fire department,
With the Chicago Communications, we've utilized them for the radio infrastructure for the fire department and police department, so we really don't want to to me, and there's just a cookie jar. So
No more questions? Roll call, please.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Seager.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Aye.
Alderman Newsome.
Aye, motion carried. Item H, motion to authorize the proper city officials to renew the agreement with Data Management Incorporated with Time Clock Plus for the period of 2 years and to provide for on-site training for the time and attendance system and the amount not to exceed $37,760. Motion by Alderman Seager, second by Alderman Rivera. Are there any questions to this motion? And is this the police department that's still on?
This is, well, citywide, these are our time clocks. So either at your computer or we have physical time clocks. So we do have it available for the entire city. The police department sworn personnel are still using a different system, but they do have access to the system should they want to switch to it.
Okay.
But everybody else, the fire department, water plant, everybody else is using this system.
Okay.
Is there a reason why we're not all on the same system?
That was the chief's decision to stay on VCS. I think it's Visual Computer Systems.
Does
and-
that cost us additional dollars?
Yes.
Would the cost be placed on to this company if they switched over, or would that include this cost?
We already charge back the police department for their share. We pay on so there's a license to have it, and then there's also a per user, so how many people you have clocking in. So we are essentially double paying for the police department to have a separate system.
What is the difference in that pay
Yeah, what's the,
that they're paying, that the police department is paying?
That would be something I'd have to defer to Chief Wallace for.
Oh, because
it
they
is-
take-
it is something that's spoken to in one of the reports that was issued to the aldermen
Does it
through
come
the
out of their
audit process.
Does it come out of their budget?
Yes.
It comes out of their budget.
Right, so for Time Clock Plus, or whatever, Data Management, Inc., that gets charged back on head count. So however many employees are in your department, that's how much of this contract you pick up. And then separately, they have a contract directly with VCS that they pay for out of their budget.
Okay, okay, that's in there. Okay, any more questions on that motion? No. Roll call, please.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Rivera?
aye.
Alderman Newsome?
Aye. Motion carried. Motion, number, I, motion to authorize the Director of Planning and Economic Development to make formal application for a grant requiring the disbursement of reimbursable funds and/or a local match requirement with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, CMAP, Local Technical Assistance, LTA program. Motion by Alderman Kirkwood. Second by Alderman Moiseo. And I will turn that over to Ms. Noel Kisher-Lepper.
Good evening. You may recall this grant, those of you who were here last year at this time. We applied for this same grant last year. CMAP was very interested in funding us. However, they wanted us to wait another year because they wanted us to wait until our comprehensive plan was done. So this grant, CMAP's LTA program, is a technical assistance program. They generally don't give money to communities. They give technical assistance either through the use of their staff or through them running an RFP process, hiring a consulting team, and then paying the consulting team directly and serving on the team. I've talked to you a little bit before about the Northern Lakeshore Trails Connectivity Plan, and that came up recently when we had the kiosk out here and we had an open house that we talked about. That was an LTA program where Beach Park is the lead and we're a partner in that. That was an example of one of the projects where they chose to select an outside consultant instead of doing it with their in-house staff. Our Washington Street Corridor Plan, which was completed in 2014 and approved by the council in 2016, was an LTA program that was done with CMAP's in-house staff. So They do it depending on the project. They make a selection whether to do it in-house or issue an RFP. I think this one's large enough, they would probably issue an RFP for a consulting team, and this would be to draft a new unified development ordinance, and that would be an ordinance that replaces our existing zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance. And that's a natural follow-up to the comprehensive plan completion. So our match requirement for our community is 15%, which I've estimated at $50,000 here. That would be if their costs are around $330,000. I suspect their costs would not be quite that high, but we wouldn't know for sure until they did an RFP process.
And you're estimating 50?
I've put in our application here, $50,000. So hopefully we would get an answer from CMAP in the spring before the budget was approved. And I think that the process would take long enough that we could fund it out of 2 budget years. But that'll be partly CMAP's decision if they choose to fund us. I would encourage them to let us run it over 2 budget years because I think it'll be more than a 12-month project.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Rivera?
Aye.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Newsome?
Aye, motion carried. Item J, motion to approve an ordinance adopting and levying a municipal cannabis retailer's occupation tax. And you had the item in your packet, and I'm going to let,
Douglas is back.
okay, Mr. Douglas, did you want to speak to,
Perfect timing.
I mean, we're imposing a tax, but we haven't, I think the cannabis is on the next committee.
Correct.
The Cannabis Ordinance is actually on the next committee in terms of the zoning ordinance that's being proposed. This ordinance would solely impose the 3% tax on cannabis sales if there were ever to be a dispensary in the city. So even if you take this item, push it to city council, and then decide what to
dependent
do
on-
with it in the future,
The zoning ordinance, correct.
you can either take them together tonight, push this to the city council, and then hold it over if the cannabis ordinance is held over. It's up to you.
Buffalo Grove passed the tax prior to passing
Yes.
the zoning issues.
Zoning ordinance, yeah.
So you would have a tax on the books that would potentially never be applied? I'm not encouraging or discouraging, I'm just pointing
No,
out
it
the
doesn't.
mechanics.
Yeah.
Any questions, any more
No.
questions on the motion?
We will speak to the how the tax works as part of the presentation in the next agenda item.
Okay. Motion by Alderman Moiseo. Second by Alderman Kirkwood.
Did you second?
Yes, I second.
Okay.
Alderman Kirkwood. Roll call, please.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Rivera?
No.
Alderman Seager?
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye.
Alderman Newsome?
Aye, to pass it to the full council. Okay, item K, motion to authorize the proper city officials to negotiate the terms of a renewal of a sales tax rebate agreement expiring December 31st, 2019, by and between the City of Waukegan and HD Supply Facilities Maintenance Limited. Motion by Alderman Kirkwood, second by Alderman Rivera. Are there any questions on the motion? I know we have a
Just,
gentleman here.
Just real quick, read that carefully. We just had a report from our CFO about the condition of our finances, and now we got somebody that has to stay. We have to give them a sales tax rebate. Every dollar sales tax helps in some way. Just remember that. But we have to give these people a rebate to keep them here.
Right.
It is what it is, and now we have this other thing that we voted on Thursday, and every dollar helps as far as sales tax. But some people, we have to give them a rebate to stay. So think about that. Hard.
Can we say the amount that we're giving back, or?
Douglas,
Martinez.
can we? I mean, once the payments are issued, it's
Public record.
public record.
record.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Everything that was, can we say the amount? So
That is
everything
being
that's
rebated.
attached is public information.
Yeah, anything that's attached to this is public information.
Just as an aside too, we've had to give car dealers sales tax rebates.
Sir, we'll wait
Every-
we'll wait until you're called up.
Mr. John.
Everybody comes that wants a sales tax rebate to do business. Not everybody, but large people want sales tax rebates. Or they can go to Wisconsin. Large generators of sales tax want rebates. Keep thinking about that. I don't think I got connected dots too hard, do I?
I've been corrected by counsel for, I believe, the company who's given me a confidentiality agreement
Right, that's
signed
what
by
I
the
was
city.
asking.
I need more time to review
Okay.
this document.
I mean,
before
once the
can
payments
comment.
are issued, like there's a payment to
Right,
HD
the
Supply.
payments are
on
all
the-
public record. There's
So what's
nothing we
been
can do
paid
about
to
that.
date is public information.
I would
But
think it'd
forecasts
be,
going forward are not.
it's public record, it's sale, it's.
Public record, it's a copy of a check.
I think
Taxpayers' money.
I think in our packet, it gave you a sample
It's under a confidentiality
I
agreement.
get it.
of the
I can
rebate.
read it though. I read it.
Yes, it's in the packet.
Under executive content.
All right, that's fine.
I see that we gave one to Classic Toyota.
Yes.
But Classic Toyota built their business from the ground up.
Correct, and they
This
did not ask for a
company-
confidentiality agreement.
This company is just leasing property in the city of Waukegan, and we started this process 5 years ago. They want a 20-year rebate.
Well, again, get back to what we got.
Right.
So
Or
we
they'll,
want half of something or all or nothing.
yeah.
But that's what happens. That's what happens. And then we have another development that doesn't want any
Yeah,
rebates at all?
right.
I would like to point out to the committee that the sales tax rebate policy, which was drafted after this agreement and the classic agreements were entered into, is attached as a resource for the committee in the documents this evening.
I understand using it as an incentive to come into the city of Waukegan. Maybe your first couple years till you get your business established, I can understand that. But for 20 years just to stay in our city, I don't think so.
I agree with Edie.
I don't think so. I don't think we should be supplementing your rental.
Look at how much sales tax they bring in. You're gonna, I don't know what it is. If it's $1 million or $2 million to us, I mean, you're gonna say you don't want them? 2.7 million in the rears.
Yeah.
Every dollar helps.
Well, we do have that current agreement, and we still have that
Right.
deficit, so.
So it's, who wants to make the motion?
I'll make the motion. Every dollar helps.
I think, we already did the
already have
motion.
it. Okay.
Alderman Kirkwood, Alderman Rivera. Has everyone read that?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
So what it is to, if we want to negotiate the terms of a new agreement, that's the motion that's on the floor. And I think that agreement would be for 5 years unless we amended it. Could we amend that to something shorter, or?
I think that, I don't know if Douglas is still here. You can make a motion to amend the motion to direct city officials, but have the final negotiated terms come back for,
Yes. Or you could just simply table this for a month with the direction that a final contract be brought before you, either one
or
would
you
be
can vote.
acceptable.
But
I
the
would
way it's
suggest a
written now
table.
almost
Table.
makes
Yeah.
it seem like it would have to come back, the way the motion's written currently.
Can we table it for the
Again, I
next
haven't
month?
seen the text of the current motion, so I couldn't comment.
We can table it for the next,
Well,
the
then
month.
pass it on to the city council and leave it there. No?
You could amend it and instruct that final terms come back before the council. I don't
Yeah,
know
why- I mean,
what
just-
actual legal effect that has on anything, though.
if I vote no, if I vote now, it's going to be no. So,
Well, I mean, remember, this is just a filter. This is just to get it to the city council.
Okay,
None of us vote there. That's where the meeting, this doesn't mean, this is just a.
so we pass it
along.
to the council, and then we can table it there, and then it can come back in a month?
Yeah.
You could bring it back in a
Okay.
month.
All right.
Then we,
Okay, roll call. Alderman Seeger, you have a question? Oh, okay.
we're gonna table it for a month?
We're going to pass it on to the city council.
With no
For-
recommendation or with a vote? Are you taking a vote, or are
Yeah,
you
we can,
passing it with no?
We can take a vote.
It's going to get held over there.
And then to,
Well,
But that- you can
if I may, I mean, I'm confused. You know, if your concern is that you want to see final terms of the contract before recommending to the city council whether to vote it up or down, why would you pass it to city council?
Yeah, I'd say we table it here.
What says, all we're doing is giving you to negotiate the terms. So the aye or yes is just to negotiate. It's not yes or no to it, it's to go negotiate. Yes or no is to negotiate, that's all.
It's to negotiate the terms of
Yeah, if
renewal.
we don't like the terms, then you vote no on the terms.
But the vote itself might imply that a renewal is
the,
a done deal, and it's simply the terms of, and I'm not sure that the chairman would be in support of a renewal.
Okay, I don't
at this
care, whatever you
point.
guys want
and
to do.
because,
Doesn't matter to me. I'm just trying to be
because in-
expeditious.
Let's hold it here in this committee.
I'm just simply asking for clarification as to what I'm being
matter.
instructed to do.
I think there's a few things that they're asking for. The negotiations of a new term, but then they wanted automatic 5-year renewals. So,
They're going to pull out. They're going to.
It's up to the chair.
Window again.
yes, Mr. John, give your name.
Yes, ma'am. My name is John Terigian. I'm here on behalf of HD Supply Facilities Maintenance. Excuse me. And Madam Chairman, you are correct about the global request, but in discussions with the city, what we had proposed in detail was a provision that would allow the agreement to be terminated by the city on 6 months' notice at any time. Furthermore, the automatic renewal, if the city wanted to not renew, they just needed to give us 60 days advance notice at the 5-year anniversary, which would avoid taking up valuable time reviewing it if everything is working the way the city wants it to work. So the proposal is not an automatic renewal 5 years and future councils are locked in. The proposal is you have 6 months advance notice to terminate it at any time during any renewal period. So you're really not obligating any future councils to be to abide by the agreement. They could terminate it at any time. And just to briefly respond, the agreement allowed my client to source sales in Waukegan that otherwise would not have taken place in Waukegan and benefited the city of Waukegan substantially as a result. It also benefited my client because part of the reason for doing this is when I first came before the city and discussed this proposal, we needed to fill a gap in revenues in order for this to work for my client. And the city at the time was very interested in the additional revenues that we created. And we did create additional revenues for the city that it otherwise wouldn't have gotten.
We both did.
So I would just suggest that if it's all right with this committee, that you approve the motion that's in front of it, because all that's being said is that a group is going to be allowed to negotiate with my client and bring something of permanence forward.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, Alderman Kirkwood, second by
Very much.
Alderman, thank you, Mr. John, and Alderman Rivera. As the chair, I would like to leave this in committee.
Yes.
It doesn't matter to me, Alderman, whatever you want to do. It just bring it to council, would it make it, would just speed it up? Because you want to go back, wait for a committee meeting to come back up? I mean, okay, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, let's hold it in committee.
Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
So if
table
we,
it.
if we table it,
It
What
comes
other-
back to the very next.
Right, but what
regular.
additional information do we need to look at in order to do a vote here in our committee? What's going to change? I mean, those of us that looked at the documentation, it's not going to change at our next meeting.
Okay, if you desire to do a vote now, we can vote.
I'm going to ask the same question. What's going to change in a month? They're going to negotiate the terms. What's going to change in a month?
I mean, Alderman Taylor, sorry.
Alderman Taylor?
We made the statement that it increased the city's revenues. Can I hear a figure of how it increased or what?
I'm not sure I can because he had the city sign a confidentiality agreement, so without legal counsel to advise, I'm uncomfortable. I have attached under executive content
Right.
payments and sales tax generated from the beginning of the agreement to current, but without legal counsel to advise. There are no other sales tax rebate agreements that we've had that have a similar confidentiality agreement. But since we have one on file, I'm not comfortable giving those numbers in a public meeting.
So it's in board docs that you can see?
Yeah, I've seen them. I'm just not sure that I totally understand them as far as what it's really, and I don't know how to ask the question and make it public. But,
Well, I mean, we could, between Noel and council and myself, we could meet individually with aldermen outside of a public meeting, but I'm
that means
just
we'd
not
have
sure.
to table this.
And I'm not sure this is an executive session topic because it doesn't deal in a real estate transaction, and we didn't post up for an executive session. I believe Mr. Long already gave an opinion that it does not. I know you're nodding it does, but with all due respect, you're not our attorney. So Mr. Long had opined that it does not meet the executive session
If we
criteria.
table this, are we okay? We have enough time before another meeting?
December
We could still
31st.
do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
we
can
have
always
time.
retroactive an agreement as well.
Okay.
So the chair has do you need a second for a table?
No.
Table you can just do.
You table it in committee.
Why anybody does business with us is beyond me.
Okay, and that was it.
We have
Now we
report-
have reports and communications. Take it away.
All right, so the first report is our monthly water consumption report. This covers the month of September, and we had revenues billed of $1.26 million and 237 gallons of water that were billed. Next month, Brittany from our Revenue Collection Division will be bringing forward the report on the senior rebate program that took place during the month of, we'll wait till next month to talk about that. Also in your packet are the business and rental license applications. It slows down this time of year, so we don't have as many of those as prior months. The video gaming report, which is a state-issued report, but we do include it in the packet, is also included for you. And then, again, this matter does go under executive content, but I did ask Itzel and Juan to come tonight. I mean, they were here anyway for the audit stuff, but we've made some changes to our food and beverage program. So both of you, one of you, both of you, if you'd like to talk a little bit about how we've changed our compliance and reporting for the aldermen.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Itzel Morales, and this is Juan Garcia. I've been with the Finance Department for 2 years now, and recently, in the last 3 months, we have taken over the food and beverage and hotel motel revenues. During these 3 months, I would call it the discovery phase, where we've taken what we already have of the information, and we've learned the system, and we started the implementation of collecting new information and working towards the next step on this revenue collection. So just a few details of the hotel and motel tax. We have approximately 20 businesses that we collect from, and 80% of those businesses pay us on time each month. That means that about 20% of those businesses, we still have to work on communication on getting their payments on time or collect late fees from them. From the food and beverage tax, we have approximately 275 businesses, and we are finding more that do owe us this tax. And we have about 15 to 18% of those businesses that are not paying us on time or continuously. They're paying us a little bit late, but they are paying us, or we have to contact them before they come to us and pay us our tax each month. We have worked on having a new system that is more proactive in the collections. We are able to track in a computer system who owes us late fees or who owes us state forms that we need to compare against the Waukegan financial forms, and therefore the system can send these automatic letters. By being more proactive, we save on time and staff that are working with these collections. Mhm. Do you guys have any questions?
How many businesses did you say?
Or
In
food and
total,
beverage?
I think, in total, that would be paying the 257, I think you said?
275.
275.
Food and beverage tax? I see that there's a little more compliance in the...
Right. That's the Itzel effect.
Yes. Thank you so much for capturing
Nice
those
job.
dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the stabilization fund report. Not too much activity going on in that report. We continue to have some loans. The Fund 695 will be paid back at the end of the fiscal year. That's just because we started that fund this year. The employee benefit plan with 109,000 outstanding. This used to be over millions and millions of dollars. So we continue to make progress, and we hope to have that paid off in a year. Fund 231, which is the Homeland Security and Fire Safety grants, that's because we have to expend the funds first for FEMA, and then we get reimbursed. But otherwise, we're in good shape on that. The budget to actual report is also included. I think you've probably heard enough from me tonight, but if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer those. And then October is our 6-month mark. So we'll have a 6-month budget to actual report in addition to our monthly next month. And that's all.
Then we have a report, item G.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. This was an audit finding that we receive from time to time capital assets, and they're sometimes buried in an intergovernmental agreement. So for an example would be 14th Street, that we entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the county to move back and forth some pipes and roads and things like that, and it's buried in an intergovernmental agreement. And then the finance department at some point is supposed to know that we now need to put these assets on our balance sheet and what to value them as. So the auditors recommended that when we are certain that a capital asset has come into our ownership or we've disposed of one, unless it's very obvious, like when we're buying a plow, we know that. But in this case, there was an intergovernmental agreement. I believe I'm not sure what committee it went through, but the Port Authority purchased a fire truck on our behalf and gave it to us. So this is just a report to make sure that it's on our list of assets so we know to add it.
And that's the fire that's going to be used
Well,
at
but the vehicle just, it takes a while. So you do these intergovernmental agreements, and then a year or 2 years later, then the asset shows up. This is just flagging it so we know to record it to our balance sheet.
And that's the one that's going to be used primarily at the airport, Waukegan Airport. Okay, and, we're finished.
We're done.
Take a motion by Alderman Moiseo, second by Alderman Kirkwood to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried, 6:24.
Another one?